My dear fellow clergymen, while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statements calling my present activities unwise and untimely. Seldom do I pause to answer criticisms of my work and ideas, but if I sought to answer all the criticisms that crossed my desk, my secretaries would have little time for anything other than such correspondence in the course of the day, and I would have no time for constructive work. I want to try to answer your statement in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms. Justice too long delayed is justice denied.
Well, peace, friends. I'm Pastor Tom Arthur from Sycamore Creek Church in Lansing, Michigan, and I'm so glad you've joined us for episode 3 of Letter from Birmingham Jail. This is the second year that our church has taken time to reflect on Martin Luther King Jr.'s classic genius, really, of a letter. It was the last big thing that we gathered together to do in 2020 before COVID hit, and it was light to my path to guide me through probably what has been the most significant civil rights year of at least my lifetime. I'm gathered here tonight in the studio with a couple of very special people. One is our director this year, Rico Bruce Wade.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Rico is an award-winning actor, director, and also professor.
Teaching artist, yes.
Teaching artist. I'll take it, whatever it is.
Yes.
And he is the director this year of Letter from Birmingham Jail. And also today in the studio, I have my very good friend, Pastor Sean Holland, the Reverend Dr. Pastor Sean Holland.
Well, peace, Tom. It is amazing to be here once again. I feel like I'm a part of Sycamore's family, and so I'm just glad to be here tonight and honored to be with our dear brother Wade also.
Sean is the pastor at Epicenter of Worship. He is also, let's see if I can get this title right. You are the Director of Transformational Leadership at One Love Global.
That is correct.
Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Did I miss any? I mean, you have a lot of different things that you do as well, so did I miss anything?
No, I think you've done well.
Hey, I wanted to invite Sean here today, not just because he is a personal friend, but also he is a local pastor and a local civil rights leader. He has, at times, sort of kicked me in the rear when I needed kicking in the rear. And I've really tried to, in a lot of ways, follow his lead over this last year. And I'm really grateful that you've joined us tonight. This year, of course, because of COVID, Rico, we couldn't do a live show.
Yes.
I've kind of missed the 300 to 400 people in the room over 4 nights. But wow, this has been a sort of different opportunity to be creative with film and video and
We had an opportunity just to reimagine the presentation.
You've done a wonderful job for us. So we are on to Act 3, the third and final act in this third episode. We would love for you to take a minute and like and share and subscribe. That's a really simple thing to do. Just share this out tonight so people can be aware of this resource. This is also all free. But if you would like to contribute to the movement of racial reconciliation in the Lansing region, you can go to our Sycamore Creek page, sycamorecreekchurch.org/give, and you can give to CORE, Congregations Organizing for Racial Reconciliation. You'll pick the CORE fund or the other fund, and then just in the memo line, write CORE, and you will help build a movement of anti-racist churches in Lansing. So, Rico, we are to Act 3
Yes.
of Letter from Birmingham Jail. What do we need to know tonight to get ready to watch this third act?
This is the concluding act. We, this week in our nation, U.S. Congressman endorse the hateful history of government-sanctioned terrorism. The perpetrator of a heinous hate crime was said to have had a bad day. It's been 60 years since King wrote this letter, and the urgency of his message is still very, very necessary. Keep that in mind. We are in the cell with him tonight.
Well, without further ado, friends, here's Act 3 of Letter from Birmingham Jail.
Lord have mercy, I see a lot of y'all out the window right now, but there's room for more. If I told you they were going to open up the fairgrounds for you, y'all be coming up from Titusville, Mason City, and Sister Tammy, leave your chiffon at home. We don't need you backsliding.
Oppressed people cannot remain oppressed forever.
I know that.
The yearning for freedom eventually manifests itself. And that is what has happened to the American Negro. Something within has reminded him of his birthright of freedom, and something without has reminded him that it can be gained. He is moving with a sense of great urgency toward the promised land of racial justice. If one recognizes this vital urge that has engulfed the Negro community, he should readily understand why public demonstrations are taking place. The Negro has many pent-up resentments and latent frustrations, and he must release them. So let him march. Let him make prayer pilgrimages to the city hall. Let him go on freedom rides and try to understand why he must do so. If his repressed emotions are not released in nonviolent ways, they will seek expression through violence. This is not a threat, but a fact of history. I have not said to my people, get rid of your discontent. Rather, I have tried to say that this normal and healthy discontent can be channeled into a creative outlet of nonviolent direct action. And now this approach is being termed extremist.
Extremism will not work in our community.
Was not Jesus an extremist for love? Love your enemies and bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Was not Amos an extremist for justice? Let justice roll down like the waters and righteousness like an overflowing stream. Was not Paul an extremist for the Christian gospel? I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists will we be? Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? Perhaps the South, the nation, and the world are in dire need of creative extremists.
As a leader in the church, I have a heavy responsibility to our religious groups.
I am thankful that some of our white brothers have grasped the meaning of this social revolution and committed themselves to it. Unlike so many of their white brothers and sisters, they have recognized the urgency of the moment and sensed the need for powerful action, antidotes to combat the disease of segregation. I am not unmindful of the fact that each of you has taken some significant stance on this issue. Though there are some notable exceptions, I have been disappointed with the white church and its leadership. I do not say this as one of those negative critics who can always find something wrong with the church. I say this as a minister of the gospel who loves the church, who was nurtured in its bosom, who has been sustained by its spiritual blessings, and who will remain true to it as long as the cord of life shall be lengthened. When I was suddenly catapulted into the leadership of the bus protest in Montgomery, Alabama a few years ago, I felt we would be supported by the white church. I felt that the white ministers, priests, and rabbis of the South would be among our strongest allies. Instead, some have been outright opponents, refusing to understand the freedom movement and misrepresenting its leaders. All too many others have been more cautious than courageous and have remained silent and secure behind stained glass windows. In spite of my shattered dreams, I came to Birmingham with the hope that the white religious leadership of this community would see the justice of our cause with deep moral concern and would serve as the channel through which our just grievances could reach the power structure. But again, I have been disappointed. I have heard numerous Southern religious leaders admonish their worshipers to comply with the desegregation decision because it is the law. But I have longed to hear white ministers declare, follow this decree because integration is morally right and because the Negro is your brother. In the midst of blatant injustices inflicted upon the Negro, I have watched white churchmen stand on the sidelines and mouth pious irrelevancies and sanctimonious trivialities. In the midst of a mighty struggle to rid our nation of racial and economic injustice, I have heard many ministers say, those are social issues with which the gospel has no real concern. And I have watched many churches commit themselves to a completely otherworldly religion, which makes a strange, unbiblical distinction between body and soul, between the sacred and the secular. I have traveled the length and breadth of Alabama, Mississippi, and all the other southern states. On sweltering summer days and crisp autumn mornings, I have looked at the South's beautiful churches with their lofty spires pointing heavenward, and at her impressive religious education buildings. Over and over, I have found myself asking, what kind of people worship here? Who is their God? Where were their voices when the lips of the Governor Barnett dripped with words of interposition and nullification? Where were their voices of support when bruised and weary Negro men and women decided to rise from the dark dungeons of complacency to the bright hills of creative protest? Yes, these questions are still in my mind. In deep disappointment, I have wept over the laxity of the church. But be assured that my tears have been tears of love. There was a time when the church was very powerful, and the time when the early Christians rejoiced at being deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed in. In those days, church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinion. It was a thermostat that transformed the mores of society. Whenever the early Christians entered a town, the power structure immediately sought to convict them for being disturbers of the peace and outside agitators. But the Christians pressed on in the conviction that they were a colony of heaven called to obey God rather than man. Things are different now. The contemporary church is so often a weak, ineffectual voice with an uncertain sound. It is so often the arch supporter of the status quo. Far from being disturbed by the presence of the church, the power structure of the average community is consoled by the church's often vocal sanction of things as they are. But the judgment of God is upon the church as never before. If the church of today does not recapture the sacrificial spirit of the early church, it will lose its authentic ring, forfeit the loyalty of millions, and be dismissed as an irrelevant social club with no meaning for the 20th century. I hope the church as a whole will meet the challenge of this decisive hour. But even if the church does not come to the aid of justice, I have no despair about the future. I have no fear about the outcome of our struggle in Birmingham, even if our motives are presently misunderstood. We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation, because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with the destiny of America.
We urge the public to continue to show restraint should the demonstrations continue, and the law enforcement officials to remain calm and continue to protect our city from violence. We appeal to both our white and Negro citizenry to observe the principles of law and order and common sense.
Before closing, I am impelled to mention one other point in your statement that troubled me profoundly. I don't believe you would have so warmly commended the police force if you had seen its angry, violent dogs literally biting 6 unarmed, non-violent Negroes. I don't believe you would so quickly commend the policemen if you would have observed their ugly and inhuman treatment of Negroes here in the city jail. If you would have watched them push and curse old Negro women and young Negro girls, if you would see them slap and kick old Negro men and young boys, if you would observe them as they did on 2 occasions, refusing to give us food because we wanted to sing grace together. I'm sorry that I can't join you in your praise for the police department. I wish you had commended the Negro demonstrators of Birmingham for their sublime courage, their willingness to suffer, and their amazing discipline in the midst of the most inhuman provocation. One day, the South will recognize its real heroes. They will be the James Merediths, courageously and with a majestic sense of purpose, facing jeering and hostile mobs and agonizing loneliness that characterizes the life of the pioneer. They will be old, oppressed, battered Negro women symbolized in a 72-year-old woman of Montgomery, Alabama, who rose up with a sense of dignity and with her people decided not to ride the segregated buses and responded to one who inquired about her tiredness with ungrammatical profundity. My feet is tired, but my soul is rested. There will be young high school and college students, young ministers of the gospel, and a host of their elders courageously and nonviolently sitting in at lunch counters and willingly going to jail for the conscience's sake. One day, the South will know that when these disinherited children of God sat down at lunch counters and they were in the reality standing up for the best in the American dream and the most sacred values in our Judeo-Christian heritage. Never before have I written a letter this long, or should I say a book. I'm afraid that it is much too long to take your precious time. I can assure you that if I would have been much shorter if I had been writing from a comfortable desk, but what else is there to do when you are alone for a few days in the dull monotony of a narrow jail cell, other than write long letters, think strange thoughts, and pray long prayers? If I've said anything in this letter that is an understatement of the truth and is indicative of an unreasonable impatience, I beg you to forgive me. And if I have said anything in this letter that is an overstatement of the truth and is indicative of my having a patience that makes me impatient with anything less than brotherhood, I beg God to forgive me. Yours for the cause of peace and brotherhood. Martin Luther King Jr.
Wow. Rico, Nor's performance is so full of passion and energy and emotion and pathos. What were you directing him? And what was it like to direct this guy?
It was an amazing experience. Both Norrlyn and Jeff, I asked them to take risks. I asked them to take risks, and assured them that we were there to support them and that it would be a safe space. They both leaned into the process. Those words came alive. He made it. Urgency was a phrase I kept using, kept coming back to. Make this urgent. Make it vital right now in this moment. This is not a history lesson. We are living this in this moment. Make that real. And he rose to the challenge.
How much did you push Nor to pull that out of him?
He was there. He came ready to play. Absolutely. There were times that I'm just very grateful to the hard work that he put into this, because there are things we had to do multiple times.
Yeah.
And to maintain that energy was a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's like 40 minutes in video, but we were here from,
yes,
I don't know, like 6 till midnight?
Yes.
Filming all of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Are we going to see him on the big screen someday, do you think?
I think as you look at, this is just an aside, just from the artist in me. You need to see that. You need to hear that voice again.
Yeah.
You need to. That is a presence that absolutely captivates from the screen.
Yeah, he hasn't been free to join us on a Saturday night yet. We got one more episode, and we're hoping maybe next Saturday.
I hope very much that he's here.
Yeah, yeah. Sean, as you encountered Nor's performance, some of what I wonder is that this is not really a performance for him. This is his life, and so he's just being himself in a lot of ways. And I wonder, as you encounter that, how close does Nor's emotional landscape reflect your own emotional landscape as a black pastor, a local civil rights leader, as Nor portrayed MLK?
Yeah, I think it brings you back to a place where you relive, the past pain, and you wrestle with the things that you're dealing with. When you look at COVID, created a jail for our community, a cave where we were, in a sense, locked up. And not only locked up, but then we were mocked by the white community, many in the white community, where it's not real. We don't have to social distance, but yet the numbers, began to report that it, disproportionately affects African Americans and black women, and all of the disparities, and it it makes you feel like you're in an ever-evolving jail cell. That was the note that I wrote down. And, the pressure when George Floyd was murdered and Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and, Eric Gardner and Castillo. I mean, just on and on and on. At some point, as a pastor, you go, do I not say anything? What do I do? And I made a decision that I was just going to make a hardline stance that, somebody has to speak out. Somebody has to say something. And it was very disappointing to some degree that some disagreed with that as a gospel preacher, it is your responsibility to preach love. But justice is love, And, I get emotional. This affects me because, we argued about a burnt target, right? Target being burned down, but we're talking about a life that was lost, a father, a mom, a sister. And, I read recently some research that said we would rather be wrong together than to be right alone. And the pressure, as I looked at, Dr. King in that cell, the pressure of being right alone is overwhelming versus we'd rather be wrong together. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so last year was very hard for me to step into the scene that we were in, and you're right, but to receive such criticism was an eye-opening experience to me, especially from my white Christian clergy men that I thought we had built great relationships with and been to dinner, golf together. But when it came to these fundamental issues of the value of a black life, now all of a sudden, I had one of my friends said to me, you need to make a decision, Holland, whether you're going to be a civil rights leader or a preacher. So I get emotional about it, and as if they were something different.
Yeah, and I think MLK shows us what those look like together in this letter, especially. He is a full-on preacher and a full-on civil rights leader.
Absolutely.
A preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ and a preacher of the love of people and justice. You said something to me this year, I don't remember when. Our rhythms all got messed up. We used to meet weekly, so we didn't get nearly as much time this year, which I deeply missed. But at some point when we were meeting, you said to me, the white people are experiencing in COVID restriction of movement just for a couple of months, and look what the reaction is. And black people have been experiencing restriction of movement for 400 years or longer. And you would, I think there's a bit of me for lamenting as I hear you say that we're still not getting it. We're not making that equation or that experience.
No, and what it does, it makes it seems like you're dealing with a spoiled brat in the house. You've got full rights, you've got access, even in your poverty you have access, and all we're asking you to do to protect others is to wear a mask, and all of a sudden now the narrative changes and you've equated it to this goes against my rights. Oh, we're at rights now? We're talking about rights? Yeah. Where was this tenacity? Where was this fervor and this energy when George Floyd or when any of these other atrocities were committed? And so you sit back and you go, what is actually going on in the mind of white America? And this country would have never been what it is if there was no slaves, because it is clear from the last year that white America could have never endured slavery, could have never produced what our ancestors produced for free for over 200 and some odd years. Mm-hmm. And so I say that honestly, and for many black folk, we look at white folk and be like, suck it up. You know, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, really, that this is the level of your privilege, that you feel that your rights are being taken away, that we've simply asked you to wear a mask to protect others in your own house. And the last thing I'll say is that what I was appalled by the white community was this survival of the fittest mentality. That if you get it, you get it. That meant you were weak. That meant you had you were susceptible to this disease. You were on the bottom part of the human echelon. And so forget about our elders and those that had pre-existing conditions. And it was a survival of the fittest that just appalled me, right? And so COVID laid bare the healthcare disparities, the economic disparities, the educational disparities. It laid bare exactly what white supremacy and racism has been designed to do in this nation.
I think white people just need to sit with what you just said for a little bit. But you've sort of pulled us into the contemporary. And one of the things I think that we've been wrestling, Rico, with the guests in the house over these last several episodes has been just how relevant MLK's letter is for today. And in that sense, I think it shows MLK's genius. I mean, I think he wrote this thing from a jail.
Yes.
Without Google, without a reference library.
Yes.
And he's quoting the giants of the Western tradition. And, you know, again, there's his genius on display. Plus, it passes the test of time.
Yes.
It's still with us 50 years later. But at the same time, that's really lamentable that
Yes.
it's still relevant 50 years later. It's still relevant.
Yeah.
I would rather him not be a genius and it not be relevant anymore. So I'm just curious, how does the contemporary relevance hit you?
You know, one of the things that when I read, you know, obviously, and I listen to the performance, and again, Brother Wade and you all did an amazing job, but it's the concept of time. And King says human progress does not roll in on the backs of inevitability, but in essence, in my interpretation, it comes through the hard work of humans. And anytime black folk stand up to address injustice, white supremacy, racism, and the structures that continue to perpetuate harm, holler back and say, this isn't the right time. It's never the right time. You know, we have an ongoing discussion about the method within the time too, right? So Black Lives Matter, that's radical, and we need to look at negotiations. We need to look at another method within time. And so here we are 55, 60 years later, and like you said, it's lamentable that, again, what we're hearing from our white community is that hit the pause button. Let's look at it again. Let's negotiate. And so this whole issue of time is one of the things that, you know, we need to really look at again. And the last one that I looked at was this ongoing terrorism. When you look at all of the church bombings that happened in Birmingham, Alabama, before King wrote this letter, the level of terrorism that he was writing on the tail end, and then the level of terrorism that happened after he wrote the letter. You're talking, 50 bombings, multiple bombings at multiple churches, multiple people dying, and here we are in the midst of Trumpism, where we have a president that basically taunts history and says that the Haitians are a it-hole nation, when we understand the truth that the Haitians really established the first true democracy in the West, where everyone had the right to vote, right? And the reason why we have Louisiana and the Louisiana Purchase is because Toussaint Louverture or whatever was, defeating the French. So they couldn't be at war in Haiti, and so they gave up the Louisiana Purchase to go back to Haiti and lose, and the British lost. So the Haitians are being punished. And then we have a president who taunts history, who attempts to twist the narrative, voter suppression across this country in the midst of COVID. We can't vote on Sunday. We can't vote mail-in voting. And all of a sudden now, things that were afforded white folk in the past are now somehow we're cheating. Police brutality. We understand the narrative and the history and COVID itself. And then the disrespect of essential workers, who most of the essential workers were black and brown folk. And I could go on. And then the Christians, and please excuse me if I offend, but the Christians that said to me, Pastor Holland, what we want to do is just pray. When you're under a terror attack, we need to do more than pray. And that was my message. It's the time message, and it's the terrorism, the increase in anti-government groups, white supremacist group, the raid on the Capitol, and the Asian hate crimes, just on and on. We are a community that have constantly been under terrorism in this nation. And last year, it reached a pinnacle.
We're going to get to the white church in just a minute. But because you brought it up right now, I want to go back to just a moment, because I have had a growing disillusionment with the white church as well. And, of course, you've been there for a lot longer, and the black church has been there for a lot longer. But you mentioned prayer. And I remember one moment this summer with you before the statewide Black Lives Matter rally at the Capitol, and coming over to your house beforehand. For me, at least, this moment was kind of a sacred moment of praying with you and for you as you stepped onto the stage. And you looked at me afterwards and you said, "This is what prayer is for."
Exactly.
To get ready to go out and do something.
Exactly.
And I, too, have had that disillusionment. Like, let's just gather in a room and pray about this, rather than let's pray and then let's pray for some direction and courage to go out and make a change.
Yeah.
And to do that well. I wonder if there's a section or a portion of the letter that's uniquely resonant with you, as I think of you as a modern civil rights leader.
I think that's super gracious.
I know you.
I would dare not take that title on. I'm Pastor Holland.
Whether you want to take that title or not, I wonder if there's a letter or a portion of the letter or an idea that gives you insight into the current civil rights issues or situation, or your own spiritual motivation. I mean, King is being a pastor as well, probably in some ways to you that the average white person or white pastor is not hearing or experiencing in this letter. Talk about the insight to your own spiritual motivation, endurance, and perseverance that you get as you watch this production or read the letter.
Yeah, when I read the letter and watched the production, one of the things that impacted me, and I see a direct correlation in my own actions when King said, "I am in Birmingham because injustice is in Birmingham." And how can I sit by idly in Atlanta knowing that injustice is happening here in Birmingham, and, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so that was something that really impacted me, especially when, as I've been in this area, pastoring, 17, 18 years now, and I've seen the pain of racism right here in the Metro Lansing area. And he talked about how you can be so tired of oppression that you lose your sense of somebodyness. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes white folk think because other black folk aren't screaming that we don't have a problem. And the issue oftentimes is folks just trying to move on with their lives. And it doesn't mean that they're not hurting, and it doesn't mean that we don't have issues. It means that I'm just tired of fighting with you all over what's mine. It was never yours in the first place. You know what I mean? And I'm just trying to find a happy place in my life in order to raise my family. And I think that was something that I looked at and said, look at the south end of Lansing. Look at it. How can you have economic development in Old Town, and economic development in Frandor, and economic development in Eastwood Town Center, and Okemos, and DeWitt, but the south end where we are, and pockets where our black and brown and BIPOC citizens look like there's no one, you understand what I'm saying? Like there's no vision. We have no vision. That's an injustice. And the other thing that just really, really touches me deeply is the fact that most people have not stopped to recognize that the black church is a part of that oppression. That we have the august responsibility to try to encourage our community while yet being oppressed as an institution. And oftentimes we oppress our own people theologically, right? Even in our own methods. And so that really made me feel, honestly, if I could be truthfully, it made me feel in some ways like a hypocrite. Because as a church leader, oftentimes we do oppress our black women. We don't see all black people. Here in our community, Black Lives Matter said we value the life of all black life. But then when you peel back the onion and got into black Christianity that identifies with whiteness, then that excluded blacks that identify as gay or queer. So now all of a sudden, because I'm fighting and saying that even a black gay life or a black queer life matters at the same value, somehow my Christianity is no longer valid. I have to now cash in my Christianity card. That is absurd. That is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, that's absurd. But again, it goes back to this whole issue. I'm here because injustice is here. And I'm just not going to compromise on that at all. I'm not apologizing for it. And white people tell black folk who to hate. You understand? Every now and again they change. So right now it's Asian, right? Yeah. And like we said earlier, if there was black massage parlors, then he would have went into black massage parlors. You understand? So I've retired. I've said I'm done allowing whiteness to tell me who to hate and who I should love. And so, again, this is something that I like to highlight here. He said, I'm here because injustice is here. And some of my white colleagues have said, Pastor Holland, because I'm close to you, I would not even think that this level of injustice would exist in my city. And I say, well, where are you riding around? Because it's right here in Metro Lansing in every system that we interact with.
Pastor Holland, how do you share thank you, by the way, for your comments on the church. I personally have, it's complicated.
Yes.
What is it like to, and this might be a moment that excludes you, Tom, what is it like in this space? How do you talk to other clergy, other black clergy, other black parishioners? How do you, this episode, by the way, I like the most because King speaks, he uses the language of Christianity to talk to Christians. This is what the church is supposed to do. Why are you not doing it? So what is it like in that space?
I find myself weeping a lot on the inside. I've learned how to cry where tears flow backwards and not forward. You often feel grossly misunderstood because the narrative goes back so far. And you feel like you're constantly trying to redefine or give more what we would call granularity to love. That we deserve love. We deserve better than how we're even treating each other. And we got to rethink how we heal. We don't know how to heal. We don't know how to be in relationship with one another, even as black folk in the church, because oftentimes they'll say, well, Pastor Holland, you too radical. You rocking the boat. You and Minister so-and-so, y'all are rocking the boat. And what our people need is a steady hand right now. And what you're showing, you're not depicting strong, consistent leadership. And so you're caught coming and going. And It's very, very painful. And here's the thing that I think that is just a bomb, is that if you pray to an omniscient, omnipresent, omni-God that doesn't respond after 400 years, you start asking, am I praying to the right God? Do I have the right method? It's obvious God is saying you got to do something different. And so now we're having these discussions where it's like, okay, well, we've been taught by white folk who Jesus is, and obviously this Jesus don't work for us. He don't come to the rescue. You understand? All he do is just pat us on the back and say, go through another decade, while white folk continue to get wealth and do and da-da-da-da. So we're having these conversations where it's like, well, I went to the Lord and I said, Lord, I don't know you. I don't know you no more. I'm going to be honest. I don't know you. And so I reject even some of the concepts of the Protestant Reformation. They didn't bring us forward. You took us back. You understand what I'm saying? Because look at us. How come we're the ones that's on the low end of love and the low? No, we're not going to accept that. That can't be the God that I see in the scripture, the Jesus that went to the well and visited the woman at the well, the Jesus that said to the woman that was caught in the act, you know, go and sin no more. The Jesus that had a host of women that went up as he was going to Calvary, that went up. This Jesus that I'm reading is totally different than the Jesus that y'all want me to pray to here in my city. And then you want our folk, our black folk, to submit to this Jesus that is silent? No, we're done with that. We're done with that. So that's just me being real about it. And this in-house, out-house Negro within the church, where the church, the black church, oftentimes takes the structure of whiteness where men are, you know, the authority, and we don't regard the voice of women. And so that creates a whole set of issues within our community. And we're wrestling right now with our faith, if I can just be honest. I think that's the most honest I've ever been. I'm pretty sure I won't have a church out there.
They're amening you
You'll
on.
have at least one person. All right?
I'm starting over at Lansing, Michigan. I'm starting over from zero at my 6.
All right, I'll be the rock.
But this is the real conversation that we're having. And this is why we cannot worship together. This is why we cannot worship together, because we do not serve the same Jesus. We want to. It's the goal. Mm-hmm. But the way we see Jesus in times of trauma, this is the issue that divides us.
And I don't know if we have enough time, but I ask. So this is
Keep
the next.
going.
This is the next question. There's still so much to unpack, but here's the next question. So how do we reconcile?
I think we need to go back to the Bible and rediscover Jesus, period. I think we need to tell the truth. You know, I'm a part of the, TRHT, Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, and part of that is truth-telling, storytelling, is telling the truth. He said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." There's an authority. We call it voracious authority. That where there's truth, then you're able to actually facilitate healing. And so what we have to do, we have to pull away and rediscover the Jesus that we've never known. And black people need to come together and ask, what does healing look like for us where white folk are not in the space? Because we've never really had the opportunity to sit down and heal from our own oppressive measures that we've learned from the plantation. We beat each other. That's all we know, to whip each other. That's what we know. We don't. You go to white churches, they singing about grace. Oh man, it's like you at a weed concert and a flower child and a Woodstock. You understand? And you go to a black church, we talking about what we going through. For every mountain that you brought me over. And the white church, oh, the love of Jesus. And it's like, what is happening right now? And so I think we have to really wrestle with the truth. The white church needs to divorce from the lies and come into the truth of, and I'm talking about global truth as to what has actually happened, and embrace that so that we can move forward. So, I mean, there's a lot like you said here, but I think truth-telling, and I think we need to create more spaces for our people to heal. We need to heal. This is way beyond counseling, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. We need to really love on each other. We don't know how to love each other. We know how to beat each other down. And so I really feel this is the greatest opportunity for the church right now is to really be about the business. Jesus was an amazing healer, and that's what salvation does. But yet the church abandons the work of healing. Okay, you don't get racism. Okay, I'm going to give you that. Okay, I'm going to give you a pass. You don't understand white supremacy. Okay, you don't read history. Okay, you can't read. I get that. But the Jesus that you serve, he healed a lot of people. Why don't we start with healing? You know, and the other thing is that salvation is not just about forgiving you. Jesus didn't just forgive us. He actually restored us and gave us more than what we've ever had. And what's so amazing is that we say we're Christian, but all we want to talk about is forgiveness, but we don't want to deal with the restoration. Colossians says, for we are seated in heavenly places with Christ Jesus. That's what the Bible said, which means he elevated us. But in our terms today, it's reparations. It's like you giving me something that I didn't work for. Reparations ain't grace. Reparations is wages that you owe me. You get what I'm saying? We can't even get the grace because we still caught up on reparations. So I think we have a real issue with how we see this God of love and how that love should facilitate deep internal healing for our people.
Thank you.
I wonder a little bit, Rico, as you're asking these questions and you're having this conversation with Pastor Sean about really kind of about the black church. I am sitting on the outside of that for the most part. But
although you were included in it.
Well, I'm in the middle of you two, at least in the room. But Sean, it reminds me of in CORE's work, Congregations Organizing for Racial Reconciliation, and the caucusing that we do. There's some time that we work together, but then we split off into people of color caucus and a white caucus. And in the white caucus, we're trying to confess and disrupt internal racial superiority and how that's jacked us up and how we've drunk that water and live in that and disrupt it, uproot it. And I've never sat in on the people of color caucus at that moment, but what I understand the work that's being done is rooting out internal racial oppression and doing that work of how that's jacked up the people of color sitting in that room. And then, so this is a space we're trying to create for, I'm hearing you describe a way that I've not even thought of it before, a space for healing of people who both, because racism impacts, it jacks up white people and it jacks up people of color.
Absolutely.
It jacks up both of us.
Yes.
And so CORE is an attempt to create a space, I think, for that healing.
Yeah, and when we went into those caucuses, you know, it was very painful. There was a lot of crying, and, you know, you start looking at the inconsistencies in how we live outside and versus how we live in the community. And, you know, and you start having to tell each other that you're worthy of love. You don't get it at the bank. You don't get it from your teacher. But you're worthy of love. And that's a new lens. Mm-hmm. You know, for a long time, Tom, I never really preached love. Because in my mind, God he wasn't Savior, he was Lord. And so my relationship with him as Lord was more about duty and assignment and tasks. You understand? And so it took the death of my father to help me to see my relationship with God was upside down. That he'd already done everything. I didn't know how to be. We don't just know how to be because, think about it. Dr. King was a phenomenal scholar. He was an intellect. He was a compassionate, and he was the quintessential human being. It took somebody like that for white folk to go, oh, you know what? I'm going to listen to him. Imagine if he was just a smidgen beneath each one of those barriers that he burst through, right? Yeah. Then we wouldn't be here tonight. And so we are told you got to be 4, 5 times, 10 times better than white people in every. That's too much pressure. And then black Christians come to black pastors and say, well, Pastor Tom, he got 21 cameras. Pastor Tom got a big old budget he's dealing with. We down here dealing with a shoestring budget, and we got kids trying to get to school. We got a whole nother context we working. And so you're constantly feeling like you're always running behind the white man, trying to overtake him in a race that he's not even in. You're the only one on the track. And so I think these are some very important discussions, and it's hard to hear, but it's the truth.
You bring up something I think really important to reflect on, and I'm gonna, if it's all right, let us go a little longer than I intended, because I think this is such a powerful conversation going on. But I don't want to let the white church off the hook here tonight in this conversation.
No.
And I do want to get to that. Because that's who Martin Luther's talking to. He's talking to, you look on the screen, he's talking to people that look like me.
And you look good, by the way.
Thank you.
Nice and snazzy with your Tom Swag, right? We're going to call him Tom Swagner.
Oh, man. I can't even recover from that.
We're at the white church.
The white church.
Yeah, that's
the
where we
white
stopped.
church.
Yeah.
The people that look like me. And I read this letter. One time, I remember in the very first Understanding Racism workshop, you asked everybody, I think really the white people in the room, like, what is it like to read the Bible and to talk to Jesus? And I told you, it's like getting your ass kicked.
I remember that.
And then my wife said, she immediately apologized for my language in a room full of pastors. But I think there's in MLK's letter, there's a deep disillusionment with the white church, the white Christian, the white pastor, the white clergy. And I think you expressed that a little earlier, like, are we talking about the same Jesus, the same God here? And as it's my hope, this is sort of my vision for this, is that my church, Sycamore Creek, would sit under Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter at least once a year. We come back to it once a year, and I don't know whether we're going to be able to pull something like this off. I feel like we hit like a peak, and it's like you can't. What are we going to do after that?
It's a wonderful thing about art is that it will recreate itself.
Yeah.
So
you'll find something new.
We'll have a different set of creative people who come up with different creative something, and we'll sit under it again in some way next year, and then the year after, and then the year after, and I don't know if that's till Jesus comes back or what, but that's at least my vision right now, that we would do that. Talk to my church or the white church that's listening and watching this. What would you hope white pastors and white churches would take away from engaging this letter? Like right now.
Yeah, I think, one of the things is that there would be this, as my mentor says, this revelation where the curtain kind of comes back, right? right? Because we say that, transformation, the engine of transformation is, revelation and obedience. That what is God revealing to you, opening up that maybe you didn't see? And it is my desire that the white church would come out of agreement with evil and would trust the God that you preach about, that he's a protector, that he's just, he's love. That's your mantra. You say he's love. And that, and I think as Dr. King said, that you would do the right thing. Silence is evil. The Bible says if your brother is in need, you don't close your hand, you open your hand wide. It actually says why. We can parse that out and whatever we're going to do. But it says, in other words, open your mouth. Say something. At some point, it would be a dream of mine that white people would see that racism truly, white Christians, is affecting the gospel witness globally. Like, this is way beyond getting a loan at the bank. This is way beyond, some of the local issues. This is affecting Jesus' witness on a global scale.
Wow.
From every continent, people are looking at Christianity and saying, is that what Christianity is? Mm-hmm. If that's what Christianity is, I don't want any parts of that. I'm going to try Allah, I'm going to try Buddha, I'm going to try, whatever, meditation, mindfulness, whatever we calling it now. But I do not want to follow that Jesus because he gets nothing done as it relates to justice. So the other thing is that my dream would be that white Christians would feel again. I think that sometimes it's like white people want to deal with racism from an academic level. Mm-hmm. We want to study it. What do the numbers show? Serious? 400 years of data is not enough? How much more? What more commission do we need to study racial inequity? We need you to feel it. And we need you to respond to us the same way you responded to 9/11. Black folks didn't go, oh, well, you know what I'm saying? We didn't lean out of 9/11. We mourned with the nation. We were a part of that. Every time there's a shooting at a school, black folks don't be like, well, we don't. No, we mourn too. But when it comes to black life, it's like you don't feel. You don't feel us in the hospitals, so we don't get the same care. And how dare you wait to Easter and find one black man to help Jesus carry a cross? You mean to tell me you concocted one black guy out of the whole story? And then he helped Jesus suffer? Oh, come on. That's brilliant. That's white supremacy at its highest level. And that you would feel that we are your brother, we are your sisters. And as the scripture says, we are one in Christ. We're your brothers. What does that really mean? And so I think for me, it's coming out of agreement, as I said, with evil, and trusting the God that you serve and that you sing about and you write about, and then asking who's not represented in God's love with our methods. And I got to say this, Tom, come up out of Africa. You ain't helping Africa. You want to go all the way to Africa and spend all this money to go to Africa and won't help black people right in your own community. Stay out of Africa. Africa don't need you. Africa don't need you. That's hypocritical. You spend $4,000 on a plane ticket. You get over there and you snap pictures and all this selfies and stuff with all these black kids. And you are perpetuating harm. You're perpetuating white supremacy that you come in and you rescue today. Stay out of Africa. And if you're not going to empower the African nation and restore the harm and reparations and be extra graceful, don't come back here. It's a slap in African Americans' face to see white Christians talk about missions work and you won't even get involved in the missions right around your own church. Get a job. Get real. For real? Like, that's me being honest. That's our private conversation. So my recommendation would be stay out of Africa and every other nation that you colonize. Stay out. Get together and start talking about how you all can heal and how you can represent the Jesus that you really want to represent. That's hard, but it's real.
I think the phrase "come out of agreement with evil" is going to continue to ring.
Yes.
Come out of agreement with evil. We probably just need to sit that for a moment. You got any final questions or thoughts before we wrap this up?
I would like to have another session. Like to invite you back.
I feel like there's going to be a session after this session. when the cameras go off.
That's possible.
we're going to keep talking, probably sitting here. But Sean, you really blessed us.
Yes,
You
thank you.
blessed me. You bless Lansing. You bless your church. Thank you for giving your time tonight to do this. Thank you for giving me your friendship. And thanks for occasionally giving me a kick in the behind when I need it.
Well, I think it's the power of relationships. And it's been hard. It hasn't been easy. I've wanted to give up. Like, I don't have time for this. But I saw your heart. And you got an amazing wife, too. I got to put that out there. Sarah's off the chain. You know what I'm saying? But I saw the collective heart that you all, that you have a heart. And that touches. And so I just want to say thank you for even stepping out to represent people in our community that other churches wouldn't dare even stand up and give them the opportunity to come into a space and worship the Lord. That's leadership, and I want to commend you for that as well. Again, we'd rather be wrong together than to be right alone. And so in many respects, you and I stand with a few for what we see in Scripture is right. It's just the right thing to do. So thank you, and Brother Wade, thank you for having me. And, my speech is what it is, but I'm tired of hurting. And I'm tired of praying to a God that seemingly says the same thing you say. Hold on.
So, Rico, next week we wrap this up with our 4th episode.
Yes.
We are going to be joined in the studio by Mrs. Gloria Davis, who is a Lansing resident. She marched in Birmingham as a child.
Yes, she may be there.
I don't know. I just pulled a picture off the internet of children marching. But
Right.
She will be here for sure.
She will be here.
And talk about, she's been in this even longer than any of us have been. So I'm really looking forward to that last episode. We're going to watch all 3 acts together.
Put them together.
With some reflection by Mrs. Gloria Davis on her own experience and how she reacts to what we've done here this year. So I hope that you would get off of the sidelines, whoever you are or wherever you're at as a Christian and as a church, and that you would join us for Congregations Organizing for Racial Reconciliation. We gather for Understanding Racism workshops a couple of times a year, 2 to 3 day workshops, and then monthly for caucusing to uproot that internal racial oppression and internal racial superiority. You could find us on Facebook, and that'll keep you all up to speed with what's going on with building a movement of anti-racist churches in the Lansing region. Thank you for joining us tonight. Until next week, be curious, be creative, be compassionate, and peace out.